Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
The Housefly Effect, how nudge psychology steers your everyday behaviour. Have you ever asked yourself the question, how do houseflies help save millions of euros? And how the layout of casinos keeps you gambling? We're not really as rational as we would like to think. It is The Housefly Effect. It's the #1 international bestseller. It is the latest from the authors Eva Van Der Broek and Tim Den Heijer. I'm delighted to say that they join us live on the line now. Eva and Tim, thank you for joining me this morning.
So glad to be there. Thanks.
So, the Housefly Effect. I mean, I played U2 The Fly because, hey, I can't resist playing some corny music that links into it. But what is the Housefly Effect then? Because most of us think houseflies, I just think they buzz around, annoy us. And if I'm in bed in the evening trying to relax and I've got no hair on my head, then I will get a fly landing right there and some ungodly. So what is the Housefly Effect? Is it a good thing?
It can be a good thing. It's not necessarily a good thing. Well, we named it a bit after the butterfly effect. It says that something small can have a huge impact. But we also named it after a famous urinal, like a toilet.
Oh, yes.
For the listeners who don't know the story, in Amsterdam, where we're based, Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, they had the problem that guys don't really aim that well when they're standing at the urinal. So they have to close down the toilets and clean the floors, which costs a lot of money and is very annoying for travelers. And they came up with a brilliant solution to paint a little fake housefly in the pot. And it actually solved the problem. It saves them, I think, 40,000 euros a year. So for us, we had a little bit of discussion if we should name our book after a urinal, but hey, here we are. But for us, it became the example of something very tiny that changes people's behavior.
And it's weird, right? Because why does it work? The scientists they weren't baffled, but they were like intrigued by this stupid tiny little thingy that didn't do anything with, I don't know, people's sense of purpose or social norms or I don't know what.
The thing is, I mean, and apologies to anybody who's still having their breakfast, but it is 25 minutes to the top of the hour. I mean, it's there. You're going to, gentlemen, you know, if you have something to aim at, you'll aim at because hey, it's, you know, what else are you going to do?
So the thing is, people can't even explain it, right? You can't even do introspection and explain why. It just happens. And that is basically why we named it after that effect. This is what these housefly effects are like, right? It's, you don't understand really why it works. You don't even notice them, but they do change your behavior.
Yes, and for Eva and me, Eva is a behavioral scientist.
Yeah.
I'm an advertising campaign maker. So for us, it's so fascinating that sometimes we can work on very big campaigns that literally involve hundreds of thousands of euros, and people's behavior just isn't changed. It just doesn't work, you know? And then somebody paints that stupid little fly and it just happens. So it's if you ask if it's a good or a bad thing, well, it is a good thing that maybe changing behavior is easier than we think. And it's a bad thing that maybe our behavior is influenced by more stuff than we think.
Yeah, but you could, perhaps the thing is, and then we know how people talk about muscle memory. I mean, when you talk about people who go back to the, I wasn't exercising for 6 months and then I went to the gym and a month later I was back to being, and you can obviously tell it from myself, I was back to being totally ripped because I had muscle memory. And perhaps our brains have muscle memory that is conditioned to us by our culture, by our education, and about our social standing.
And perhaps it even goes further back, right? Because these brains haven't evolved over the past 20 years. So there's all these systems at work that, do work in most circumstances. It's just that there might be weird kind of irrational side effects of, for instance, think of these cats that are super scared by cucumbers because they have this innate system that sort of tends to see it as a snake. Well, we as people, we've been raised very socially, of course. So whenever we see people performing some kind of behavior, we sort of imitate that. And that is what's going on. You see little tiny cues of, for instance, social behavior of someone, I don't know, parking a bike or something. And then you think, oh, apparently that's allowed here. Let me do the same. So it's all these tiny little, cues that we pick up, heuristics or so, or things that we use to decide on what to do. And we basically wrote a book on that, on tiny effects.
It's interesting you say about parking bicycles, and hey, because you're in Amsterdam and you should know about parking bicycles more than anybody else on the planet. But we like to think, oh, well, I am an individual. What's the old saying? I'm an individual and so is everybody else. But we always say, I stand out from the crowd. And there always has this thing about, the lone artist and the writer on his own. And we have a special thing, don't we, for people who do things solitary, hermits, wizards, you name it. But actually, when it comes down to it, we are social animals. No matter how we want to say we're not, we are. So, the example of people parking their bikes there or their shopping trolleys there, we will follow the pack or the herd mentality.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, one thing that fascinates me is that even when we do not subscribe to social norms, people who don't subscribe to social norms still act the same. The area I live in, there are a lot of people who've been out partying in the center of Amsterdam, and then they bike through my neighborhood. And they all make the same drunken noises when they're being really... They're on their worst behavior. They don't care about the norms anymore. There's still a norm for how to act in that situation. It's like, that's the sound you make. You don't make a different sound. That's not the norm for when you don't subscribe to the norm. So I think even a hermit will probably be subscribing to the idea of a hermit that we have in our society and be like, so I need to do these things to be a good hermit, you know?
Yeah.
And there's this tendency that we have to... Like, we do notice things that stand out from the crowd or a system very much, like you were saying. So there's this example that Tim came up with, or actually he found it, of course, and he labeled it. There's you have to see it visually. There are all these hard rock bands, these really dark, like black letters, big signs, logos, these things. And when you see an overview of them, there's one that stands out. I think it's called Party Cannon. Yeah, that. And it's all blue, yellow, bright pink balloons and flowers and stuff. And that is, of course, the one that stands out, that people go for, because it's so obviously standing out, basically. So we do have a nose for that as well. And of course, marketeers know that. Although they try to fit into the system, standing out in some aspects can be super beneficial. Same goes for us as human beings.
Yeah, Henry Rollins famously wrote that you shouldn't engage in rock star behavior by throwing TVs out of the window and sticking. The way you should stick it to the man is actually going to college, getting a good degree, and doing well, not dropping out at 15 and and dying of an overdose when you're. I mean, anybody can do that, but true rebellion is going to college and getting A grades and then sticking it to the man.
This reminds me of a great quote by Brian Ferry of Roxy Music. He said the difference between Roxy Music and other rock bands at the time was that other rock bands trashed their hotel rooms and Roxy Music wanted to redecorate them.
Genius. So
this is the way the brain works, right? That's why we remember Roxy Music and maybe not a bunch of those other bands.
Exactly. So, but when it comes to sort of behavior, then you mentioned to marketing. I mean, surely that is the ultimate aim. Is obviously as an advertising agency is to get people to buy more of whatever the client is selling, but to do it in a way that they don't feel they're being sold to. So it becomes an automatic and natural reaction, and that again is Housefly Effect.
Yeah, though scientists do differ in that respect. So there's lots of behaviors where people actually don't mind knowing that they're being influenced into it, so to say. So there's all these famous little nudges, these, for instance, these footsteps on the floor in the direction of the glass containers, things like that. And people, of course, understand what they're for and who made them and why they're there. But still, it goes automatically much easier if you know to find the glass container. So it's not always the case that if you know what you're being talked into, you're rebelling against that.
There is a point where people feel that they're pressured into something, and then there will be reactance. Then there will be like, no, I'm going to make my own decision. So what really helps is when people have seen a brand a lot of times, they tend to think that it comes to mind to them. So, for instance, they think of beer and they might think, oh, Heineken is the first brand that comes to mind, right? And actually, our minds are a little bit arrogant. So they think, well, there must be a great reason why I thought of Heineken first. It can't be just their advertising.
Hey, I'm immune for that. Yeah. Yes.
So they tend to think that something that comes to mind is something they have selected consciously with good reason. So, yeah, that's what in advertising campaigns we often go for, that top of mind awareness, that being the first thing that comes to mind, that makes it really strong. And we have this in all these categories. If you say, who's the greatest scientist of all time? We're probably, even Eva, as a scientist, probably thinking of Einstein right now.
Sure.
Why? I don't know. He has a top of mind position, which is really valuable. So that's what advertisers go for. But yeah, also all these little tricks that you see in daily life just to get people to actually buy something. I think we're half aware of them. We sort of see them when we're in the supermarket, but then we do these little safaris where people get a bingo card and have to check them off. Mm-hmm. And even people who work in marketing are shocked to see how many of these little signals, how many of these little tricks or houseflies there are within a few yards of supermarket.
Yeah, there's cute and weird ones like, I don't know, placing containers that don't have to go into the fridge, placing them into the fridge to make them look more expensive. These kind of non-obvious but very effective tricks, so to say.
So what about sort of things like placebos, for example? You know, people take pills just for the sake of taking pills. Oh, I mean, you could say a lot of it is psychosomatic. Okay, I think I've got a headache coming on. I'll go to my doctor, you know, and half my family are medical, and they say they get people coming in all the time, you know, coming in once a week. Or they used to when they get appointments. And they would literally give them, you know, sweeties, basically. I mean, they don't taste like sweetie, but you feel better.
So my grandfather was a GP, and what he did was he dealt out lots of sweets, but these salty sweets, right, from the Nordic countries. So this lakritz kind of things that people here actually like. But I would advise your family to do that, because the worse it tastes, or at least the more taste it has, the more you have the feeling that it works. Like you need to give them a very specific color, these kind of things. Make it very specific and very loud, and then the placebos will work even better.
Yeah, but of course, a brand on a bottle works the same way. People will taste something different when they see that. For instance, lager drinkers usually cannot tell their favorite brand from any other brand, but they love it a lot more as soon as there's a sticker on it. And then if you see it in a brain scan, you can see that there's actually more enjoyment. So it works that way. We also love placebo buttons, like the button to set the temperature in an office. Often there's nothing behind the button. It's just a fake button. And the little buttons that you push if you want to cross the street, lots of those in many countries are fake as well, just to get you to wait and be a little bit more patient and feel like I have some influence over when it's going to turn green. And I heard this great story about a bass player, a famous bass player, who has a placebo button on his bass.
Yeah.
And actually, when the producer says he needs a different sound, he just hits the switch and does nothing, and the producer will be like, "Oh, that sounds a lot better." And,
I've interviewed him. He's the guy who played bass for Studio. Yeah, the guy with the massive hair and the beard. Yeah.
Oh wow!
And he's got a really strange name which I've forgotten. It's something. It's both begin with S. I'll remember it in a minute. But yes, he has the placebo to flick it up, and the guy goes, "Yeah, that's absolutely it." Is it because we want to feel like we are masters of our own destiny, that we push these buttons that have nothing, or we like to flick a switch?
It's even cooler. We already feel we are the master. So people really overestimate their own influence on things and how good they are at stuff and how well they know themselves and all these things. So we're just very good at self-deception, basically. And there's all these kinds of ways in which you can use that fact to influence people. Yeah, like these examples.
So when it comes to writing a book like The Housefly Effect, I mean, what are you trying to show with this? Are you trying to make people more aware of this effect, or is it something that we probably have never considered? I mean, everybody who's been to a bathroom has maybe seen the fly or the target or whatever else. Gentlemen, I'm talking about. Ladies, no problem. But I don't suppose we've ever, we thought, oh, that's a neat idea. But I'd never really thought the fact that it's saving millions in cleaning and hygiene and having to shut bathrooms down while the maintenance people go in.
I think the cool thing about these effects is that we underestimate them so much. So it's not that we wrote a book to say, look, people, this is a very important thing to know about. It's just, it's so super funny that we seem to not be able to recognize the influence these things have on our behavior. So basically, our book is an attempt to make people laugh about themselves, right? But there's many of these things that do work or don't work, but that if you try them, if you put them to work, you can actually, by just playing with them, seeing whether they work or not. And that gives you some kind of a milder idea of people's minds. You don't think anymore, oh my God, this is a weirdo because of that. It just feels much more like, oh man, this is the human condition. We're just super easy to influence. And it's fun to play with these things. It's fun to, in a work setting or so, write different kinds of emails that end with, hey, but you can choose yourself. You are free, whatever you like. And seeing that the number of, I don't know what, is coming back in a much quicker speed.
Here's the thing, because we now live if we'd written this book 30 years ago, we would have been a lot younger from the beginning, but if you'd written the book 30 years ago, we wouldn't have had to factor in social media. And that is the ultimate Housefly effect, because you get an immediate endorphin hit from the likes or the no likes, and the power of suggestion and the power of, there must be so many houseflies on social media that you need a very big swatter to get rid of them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the only thing that really works, and this goes for a lot of situations, if you want to drink less alcohol, the way to do it is not to go to a bar and not to have it in your house. You cannot trust your own motivation or your willpower when you are in a bar or in a house. Same goes for Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter. Only way to not doom scroll there and get in this like rageaholic kind of mindset is just not go on there. It's impossible. You're not going to win from the algorithm. And I think we need to we need to understand that a little bit better, that there are contexts that are so well designed to influence us that the only way to keep control of our actions is to not engage in that context.
And the cool thing is there's these whole almost technological arms races to battle that, right? To sustain your willpower. So there's all these software and apps and things that, for instance, let you set a certain limit of the number of minutes that you spend on Twitter or these kind of things. So self-limiting devices, commitment devices, I think have a long way to go. And we haven't explored that as much as I think we should, because all these platforms and social media settings are so much designed in combination with lots of data on how human minds work that we, by judging our own mind, we can never fight it, right? We need tools for that.
How much do we get attracted to, for example, beauty? I mean, or what we think is attractive? Is that because are we predisposed to go, okay, that's a good looking guy, that's a good looking girl, I'll find out what they're doing, and more so than we should do for somebody who's got inner beauty, for example?
Inner beauty.
Yeah. I've got tons of it at the moment.
I think but that's such an, I don't know who said that. Inner beauty. It's just mean to judge people on that, right? It's not like that's divided equally across people. Inner beauty. People can't help it if they don't have inner beauty. But anyway, I think, yes, we know, of course, that people go for beauty, symmetry, all that. There's great reasons for that. I'm thinking of where to start. I once wrote my master thesis on how birds seduce each other. So on mate choice in birds. Of course, they go for beauty, but they also go for rhythm, right? Linking back to where we started this topic. And what they seem to want is a steady rhythm that then has some surprises. So what they want is something they recognize so they can judge how well you're doing on that respect. And then something that's surprises you, is new. There was a term for this, right?
I'm not sure we know the term for it, but I'm sure we're giving everybody relationship advice here. You want a steady rhythm, but with some surprises.
Yeah. But it's this mixture of what you're expecting and what you're not expecting that really makes things work. And you see that in a lot of situations. It's like the sequel to your favorite movie or a new album. The new Cure album just came out, and it's sort of like this integration, but it's also different, and that makes it delicious and very depressing, but okay, here we are. And I think these are it's like a sweet spot for your brain, because our brain has all these different biases and heuristics and instincts that help us survive, right? And also that help us procreate. And to survive, we need to probably pick stuff that's safe, that we've seen before, that's recognizable, because we've seen it before, it hasn't eaten us, so it's safe. But also to procreate, we have to be a little bit different from the rest and stand out. So we have these contrasting instincts. So if you can build a product or a movie or a song that has both in it, then that's the hit formula. Yeah.
What are you hoping that people will discover from the Houseflies, and what can they take and use in their everyday life?
I'm just hoping that, like us, they can laugh at themselves a little bit and say, okay, yeah, I have this image of myself in my head where I'm very reasonable and very rational, but I'm pretty influenceable as well. And that's okay. So I sort of feel good about that. I also hope that they would just pick little examples and little some of the candy that we've put in the book, just fun examples, fun terms, and use them in daily life or use them in work and annoy their coworkers by saying, "Yeah, but that's a housefly effect there." You know, just behavioral science has evolved way beyond naming little effects, but naming little effects is a lot of fun, and it's a great gateway drug to behavioral science. So I just hope people will pick up on those things, have fun with it, and then be inspired to look a little bit further.
Yeah, and on a personal note, I think so we've named these different little flies, right? We've got 7 of them. One is this social fly, one is the self-deception fly that we talked about, and then there's this timing fly. I would love people to play with the idea that they overestimate their future self, because I tend to shift tasks to my future Eva, right? That's what I do in daily life. But slowly, from writing and working on the book, I'm discovering ways to sort of, limit my overestimation of my future self. And that really makes me happier, I think. I try not to postpone stuff as much by just doing these commitment devices that I was talking about, like installing apps on my telephone that say, no, you can't spend more than 10 minutes on this or that. It sounds mean, but these kind of things, just knowing about the brain, they can really help you in your daily life, I think.
The book is called The Housefly Effect, How Nudge Psychology Steers Your Everyday Behavior. It is by Eva Van Der Broek and Tim Den Heijer. You can order it via our own virtual bookstore. Are you guys on social media? Can we, if we're not being rageaholic, and Tim, that's my word for the day, trust me. How can we find you online?
We are both on LinkedIn, and I am also on X, formerly known as Twitter, trying not to get into fights.
Yeah, for 10 minutes a day.
10 minutes a day. And by the way, the name of the bass player was Leyland Scala.
Oh,
He's the guy who plays with the big white beard on the Phil Collins track. So there you go, the famous. The book is called The Housefly Effect. It's by Eva Van Der Broek and Tim Den Heijer. It's been great to speak to you today.
That was a joy, really.
Thank you. Yeah.